I'm not getting interviews or enough interviews. I'm not progressing in the following rounds. If most of your time is dedicated to browsing on LinkedIn, looking for open roles, applying here and there, effort alone does not equal speed. Those hours, dozens of hours maybe, that you dedicate to job search, they do not translate to traction, which means that your strategy needs to change. Welcome back to the Career Diet Podcast. I am so excited. We are back. I took a few weeks off from recording new podcast episodes. My husband and I usually go away in the winter, and we are typically somewhere in South America for a few weeks where we are working remotely and then we're traveling and exploring. So this year we were in Chile. If you were following me on social media, on Instagram, I was sharing a little bit of the behind the scenes of that journey. So I was not recording then. And then on a personal side, we also moved out of our house. So I didn't have my office set up. We're actually still looking for our new place. So I kind of have a temporarily office and filming spot here set up. But I'm so excited to jump back into the podcast. And today I thought we'd start with something that comes up quite often, and that is job search timelines. Because I hear this every single day. Some people tell me, well, 3-month timeline to find a new job is way too long. And then other people tell me, well, 6 months is not enough time. So today I want to talk about what is actually realistic, because it does seem to me that people want a clear answer on how to think about their timelines so that they're setting their goals and they're really setting themselves up for success. I will also be talking about 4 things that shape your timeline, and again, what's actually realistic in this market. So let's dive right in. So what prompted this conversation today is a question that I get asked often. Well, when it comes to your clients, when it comes to your coaching program, on average, how long does it usually take for your clients to land a job? And that's something I've been thinking a lot about. Kind of, where is this question coming from? Because yes, we actually do track exactly how long it takes our clients on average to get a job. And that number is actually very impressive, but I don't share it anywhere. I don't even share it with our clients internally, because without context, that number is actually useless. So let's talk about it. Here's something to think about. No 2 people are the same, ever. Everyone's starting point is different. Everyone's goals are different. Everyone has different capacity in terms of how much time they can dedicate to job search. Different constraints. Maybe you're working full time and you have young kids. And also different market reality for different companies, different industries, and different functions. So comparing yourself to anyone else is really unproductive. And that is why I don't like to share the number of how long does it take on average, because that number doesn't tell you anything really for you specifically, because you need to look at your own situation. In fact, I offer you that even comparing yourself to yourself is not necessarily a good approach here. Because if you're thinking, well, last year or 5 years ago or 7 years ago, when I last job searched, it took me 3 weeks, it took me 2 months, it took me 3 months, or it took me 0 time because I got poached. Therefore, your expectation now is that that's what job search is like, and that's what job search should take. However, 2 years ago, 7 years ago, the job market was different. You were different. You were going for a different role, for a different seniority. You were going for a different compensation. So even if you are comparing your own timelines to your timelines, they're never going to be the same. Yes, it gives you some data, but it's also not exactly a helpful number to compare yourself to. So the question you need to be asking yourself is not how long should job search take? The better question to ask yourself is, what is shaping my timeline? And there are generally 4 things that are shaping your timeline. So that's exactly what we'll be diving into today. Number 1, your starting point is what will affect your timeline. What do I mean when I say your starting point? Do you know exactly what you want, the specific roles and companies that you're targeting, or are you unclear on that? That will affect your timeline. Where is your job searching skill set at right now? So, how are you at networking? Do you have a network in the companies and industry and functions or function that you're targeting? Do you know senior people, decision makers there already? Do you have a relationship with them? Do you know how to develop that relationship, how to kickstart that relationship if you don't know anyone? Do you know how to get those people to meet with you when you meet with them? Do you know what to do in those meetings to create advocates? That's a skill set. If you never had to do this intentionally, it will take you some time to develop that skill set, to get really good at that. How about your positioning skills, your communication skills, your delivery, your confidence? Are you comfortable speaking about yourself? Do you understand your experience? Do you know how to extract what's important in your previous experience and convert it to what matters to the employer? Again, if you have never had to do this intentionally, this is a skill that you will need to learn. Look at whether you're landing interviews right now. If your biggest constraint is actually converting those interviews into offers, you will probably move faster than someone who has no idea what they want and has not had a job interview in 15 years or has been job searching for 6 months and has not had a job interview. Because if you're already getting interviews, then you need to work on the positioning, the delivery, the being seen as the solution for the employer. So it's a tighter skill set to work on rather than someone who is a few steps behind. So your starting point is essentially how big of a hill you have to climb to be that person that you are trying to be in that role, right? That senior in that specific industry. Do you sound like them? Do you have a network of that person? Do you position yourself as that person? Are you as confident as you need to be? So does your job search skill set only need refinement, or it's not really something you have developed at all because you didn't have to, and now you will have to develop a skill set? Again, you will move at a different pace. So that is your starting point. Now, I do want to be clear here that when I say it's a skill set, it doesn't mean that it's something that will take you years to develop. If you have the right support, the right tools, the right strategy, you can develop that skill set in a matter of a few months. But it's still a skill set. It's not something that will happen in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month. I really want for that to land today, that it is a skill set. And yes, you can develop it relatively quickly. But if you have never intentionally done it, having the expectation that you will land a VP role in a new industry, in a new type of job market without that skill set very quickly is probably unrealistic. All right, the second factor that affects your timeline is the size and the specificity of your goal. And that's another reason I really don't like to compare job search timelines, one person next to the other person, because someone who is staying in the exact same role, function, industry, and is going maybe for a direct competitor and is already getting interviews is going to get there faster than someone who says, well, I don't really know what I want, and I'll probably have to pivot. So I'll need to figure out what the goal is, and I will need to figure out how to position myself, how to pivot. I will need to identify those companies, build my network. Oh, also, I want to move countries. Well, the second person will not move as fast as the first person. And I know this sounds so simple and so straightforward, and you might be thinking, well, and of course, well, this is obvious. But somehow, this question of how long does it take on average is one of the most common questions that I get. But what you need to think about is the bigger your goal, most probably the longer it will take. And another part here to think about is how niche your goal is. I'll give you an example. We have someone in the Start Canada program right now who is looking for senior leadership VP roles in AI strategy with a small set of very specific target companies. And over the last few months, she has done a phenomenal job meeting people that she needs to know and people who need to know her within those companies. And I'm talking C-level executives, CTO type of people that took months actually to track down and get them to meet with her. So she knows all the right people, all the decision makers. She understands their needs, their priorities. So she has set herself up for success with those companies. But that VP role needs to be open. So she can be doing everything right, and she has been doing everything right. And on top of building those advocates, she's also been practicing for interviews every single week. So when she gets the interview, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's a month from now, she is 10 out of 10 ready. But that role needs to be open. So if you're also targeting something very specific, whether it's a specific company, a specific role within that company, or a very niche type of role, and you really, really want to make that happen, the availability of that role and what the market says and what the market needs also is a big factor in how fast you can land that job. All right, factor number 3 is the time and energy you can realistically dedicate to job search. Because once again, there is a big difference between someone who is working right now full-time, has 2 young kids, and wants to really level up in their seniority and move industries and make 40K more, but they have very limited time in their week to dedicate to job search, maybe a few hours max every single week, and they have a big goal. So that person, once again, will take longer than someone who tells me, listen, I want to do exactly what I was doing before at a direct competitor and I was laid off. So now my whole week is open. So I'm dedicating 40, 50 hours every single week to developing my job search skill set, to meeting people, to reaching out to people, to practicing for interviews. By definition, the second person will go faster. And it doesn't mean that the second person is more committed. It's just the capacity is different. The time frame for how fast you will develop and improve that skill set, for how fast you will meet the right people, will just naturally be different. So your input makes a difference. And again, this sounds so simple, but we have to think about it when you are assessing your own goals and your own timelines. And finally, factor number 4 is what you actually do with that time that you dedicate to job search. Because I want to be very clear here that it's not just about how much time you believe you're dedicating to job search. It's not that it's 50 hours a week, meaning that for sure it will translate into an offer in X amount of weeks or months. But it's about whether that time and effort is really creating traction. Because 2 people can be dedicating the same amount of time but be seeing very different results. Because if most of your time is dedicated to browsing on LinkedIn, looking for open roles, applying here and there, and you don't really have a concrete plan, you don't really have a concrete plan for your week and for your day, if you don't have concrete targets, and when I say targets, it's not how many jobs you're applying for, it's how many people you're meeting with, it's how many hours you're dedicating to interview practice, because those are the very specific goals that we set for our clients for them to see traction in the first 30 days. Your results will be significantly different because effort alone does not equal speed. And you actually might be someone who is listening to this and thinking, well, I'm spending a lot of time on job search, but I'm not getting referrals, I'm not getting introductions, I'm not getting interviews or enough interviews, I'm not progressing in the following rounds. then that means that those hours, dozens of hours maybe, that you dedicate to job search right now, they do not translate to traction, which means that your strategy needs to change. And we get actually with our clients ruthless around where exactly they dedicate their time every single week. We're very, very specific with how they're spending that time because your time is expensive. Your energy is valuable. So it is very important for you to be focused in order to see traction in the fastest way possible. All right, so what is actually realistic in this market? Well, based on what we talked about today, I hope that you're starting to see that realistic can be 1 week, 2 weeks. And we have had a number of clients in the last 6 months get a new offer in a week, in 2 weeks. But realistic can also be 6 months or 9 months. And both types of timelines are normal. I really want for you to hear this. A fast timeline does not mean that that person is better. A longer timeline also does not necessarily mean that something is wrong. So what realistically matters for your own timeline is whether it makes sense for your starting point, your goal, your available time that you dedicate to job search, and your strategy. So instead of asking, how long should this take? You need to start asking, what is my starting point? How big is my goal? How big is the change that I'm trying to make? How much time am I willing to consistently dedicate to job search every single week? And is my strategy actually creating traction? So friends, there is no one universal timeline. Any sort of average that you're hearing anywhere online oftentimes is a marketing tactic, and I really want for you to be taking that with a grain of salt. You really cannot compare your job search timeline to someone else's. Once again, what you need to be looking at is your starting point, your goal, your strategy, and whether you are making meaningful progress towards your goal every single week. All right, friends, that is it for today's episode. And if you're listening to this and you're realizing, all right, I really need to shift my strategy because it's not creating traction. I really need to be ruthless and more strategic with where and how I spend my time when job searching, then let's talk. That's exactly what we do with our clients. So I'm going to leave a link below in the show notes where you can book a call with my team and we can look together at where you're at, what your goals are, where you're getting stuck on the way to those goals, and how exactly we can help. All right, that is it for today. I will see you in the next episode.